Hi Portland Fire, I'm Jessica Cohn, your wellness coordinator. Today we are going to be discussing our health wellness updates and what we're launching for the month of July. So we're going to be going into a sleep focus, which we call Just Sleep. So I'm going to be going into a list of sleep tips that I've created where I've really researched and looked a lot of information that is out there of how to improve your sleep and create deeper sleeping habits. If you refer back to the wellness show that we did in April, that was our recharge month. Dr. Kale did a really great interview with myself about tips and techniques for better sleep habits and really talking a lot about the importance of sleep. I know for all of us, we know or should know that sleep is important. And so what I'm going to dive into is, as a firefighter and with your schedule and getting up all night and things like that, what we can try to change in our habits during the times that we can control to create better sleeping habits. I'm going to be going through tips that I've created, really thinking about a firefighter's lifestyle and schedule and how to give you concrete things that you can do to improve your sleep and attain deep sleep. What we're going to do between each tip is show a short video that explains further and deeper into the tip to give you more information. Sleep tip 1. So in order to manage your sleep, you need to measure your sleep. This is a really important one. The best example I can give is when I sit down with someone and we go over a nutrition plan or a fitness plan. There's a lot of measurements that we do within that. With a nutrition plan, we measure where their body fat and their weight percentages and their inches so that we have a starting point to know that if we change their nutrition and their goal is to lose body fat, we measure them in a month or so and we see, hopefully there's a positive change there. Similar with fitness, we measure, weights that are lifted, reps, things like that. And as they follow a program, we're looking for positive changes. Same idea you want to think about with sleep. In order to know if you're sleeping better or sleeping deeper or getting more hours of sleep, it's really important to consider measuring it. So it's a little bit harder thing to measure. You are going to need to look into a device to measure, whether you're using a Fitbit or something like that. You can also just take your heart rate before you go to bed and then when you wake up, and you could create a little log where you measure where your heart rate is. You want to get a starting point, especially if you're going to listen to the next tips that I talk about and make some changes. We want to know where you're at now so that if you make those changes, you can hopefully measure an improvement in your sleep or not waking up throughout the night, things like that. So we're going to go ahead and go now into a video just a little bit further about this tip.
Well, first of all, in order to manage it, you have to measure it. Get some sort of an app. I use a product called Sleep Cycle, and if you use it with like a Fitbit, you can actually see how low your heart rate. I mean, my heart rate goes down to 40 beats per minute in deep sleep.
Wow.
I mean, the first time I saw that, I was shocked. And so once you get one of these sleep apps and you see how you're sleeping, then you can start to do things that improve sleep.
So you can do it at many different levels. I mean, we can start at the sort of gross high level, which is epidemiological studies across millions of people, where you do surveys, you ask them about their sleep, and then you look at health outcomes. The first thing from that data that's clear is an unfortunate truth. The shorter your sleep, the shorter your life.
Whoa.
Short sleep predicts all-cause mortality.
Which is really ironic because people that want to sleep less are like, I don't have a whole lot of time.
Yeah.
This life is short.
Yeah, that old maxim, you can sleep when you're dead.
Yeah.
Well, it's mortally unwise advice because we know from the data you will be both dead sooner and the quality of that now shorter life will be significantly worse.
Yeah, that's counterintuitive to people. The idea that you need this, it's not just like you're making best use of time by sleeping less. You're not. You would make best use of time by being awake less.
Exactly.
Which is crazy.
I mean, wakefulness, firstly, from a brain perspective, is low-level brain damage. We know that.
Wakefulness is?
Yeah.
Low, like right now, you and I are getting low-level brain damage.
Yeah, that's right. And it's sleep that offers a reparatory function.
Wow.
And I'll give you one example, which is your risk for Alzheimer's disease. Insufficient sleep across the lifespan now seems to be one of the most significant lifestyle factors determining whether or not you'll develop Alzheimer's.
What studies, or if any, have been done on people that work the third shift?
So people have looked at shift work in general. They haven't necessarily split it down at to that granular point. But what we see is that shift workers have higher rates of obesity, higher rates of diabetes, but perhaps most frighteningly, cancer. And in fact, we now know the link between a lack of sleep and cancer is quite strong. Insufficient sleep is linked to cancer of the bowel, cancer of the prostate, cancer of the breast. And the association has become so powerful that recently the World Health Organization decided to classify any form of nighttime shift work as a probable carcinogen.
So there's also several apps that you can use to measure your sleep. Some you actually just kind of put under your pillow and they measure like your movement and stuff. They're not as accurate as using something like we mentioned, like the MyFitbit or something that tracks your heart rate, but that is an option as well. Another thing you can do is you just time when you go to bed and when you wake up and you're just logging your hours. But that may not help you dive into if you're getting deep sleep when you are sleeping. Tip number 2. So we want to measure and have something that we can track. We also want to make a plan. So based off the tips that I go over after tip 2 is write out what you're currently doing. What maybe things are you doing that you could change or your goals to change? Similar to if I create a nutrition plan, this is what someone's going to eat on a daily basis. A fitness plan, these are the exercises and the workouts they're going to do. Make a sleep plan. And so when we talk about the following tips, we want to think about what we're doing on a daily basis. It's not all what we're doing at night, but what are we doing from when we wake up to when we go to bed to create good sleep habits. And a lot of those habits are created in the morning as well. And that's where these tips will revolve around, is what can you do all day to attain better sleep and deeper sleep and maybe even fall asleep if you're having issues with that.
The first tip is regularity. Go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. Regularity is king, and it will actually anchor your sleep and improve both the quantity and the quality, no matter whether it's the weekday or the weekend, or even if you've had a bad night of sleep. And the reason is because deep within your brain, you actually have a master 24-hour clock. It expects regularity and works best under conditions of regularity, including the control of your sleep-wake schedule. Many of us use an alarm to wake up, but very few of us use a to-bed alarm, and that's something that can be helpful. The final tip, have a wind-down routine. I think many of us in the modern world, we expect to be able to dive into bed at night, switch off the light, and we think that sleep is also just like a light switch, that we should immediately be able to fall asleep. Well, unfortunately, sleep isn't quite like that for most of us. Sleep as a physiological process is much more similar to landing a plane. It takes time for your brain to gradually descend down onto the firm bedrock of good sleep. In the last 20 minutes before bed, or the last half an hour, or even the last hour, disengage from your computer and your phone and try to do something relaxing. Find out whatever works for you, and when you have found it, stick to that routine.
So tip 3, we're going to go into our sight, our eyes. So what I want you to think about is before we had unnatural light, before we had our devices, before we had bright lights, what did we have to wake us up in the morning, and what do we have to tell us that it's nighttime and it's time to calm down and go to sleep? Is the sun. So that's our natural light. So those that have insomnia, it's recommended that they get outside in the morning, not through a window, or anything like that. You need to get outside and see daylight. Now, if you're up before the sun is up, then the idea is once it's up, you get outside for 5, even more towards 30 minutes, depending on how the severity of the insomnia is. But at least 5 minutes, go outside and see sunlight. And so what this does is it resets your circadian rhythms. And so we want to see light in the morning, and ideally natural light, not fake light, unnatural. And then at night, you want to go outside and watch the sunset. And then once that sun is set, you want to minimize your exposure to unnatural light. So you want to really try to dim any lights, and then the big one is staying off your devices. So the recommendation, especially with those with issues with insomnia, is to limit devices 90 minutes before bed. And that's including TVs. It's anything with that bright light exposure. You can use blue light glasses, things like that, but it's really recommended, depending on the severity, is to completely eliminate the devices before bed. I'll recommend even trying 30 minutes or maybe an hour before bed. So I know it's tough, because if you're sitting there and you're like, well, what about if we get a call? We get bright lights and we're in the rig and it's loud, and on devices when you're on calls as well. So obviously those are times that you can't control. It's part of the job. You're going to get woken up. So what we really want to look at is during the times we can control, on shift and off. So on shift, if you're not having a call and you're at the station, trying to eliminate the exposure to those devices, dimmer lights, things like that, if you can control that, where you're sleeping. And then at home, really looking into that. So another big one that the feedback I'll get from that tip is, I use my phone to help me calm down, to stop thinking or to fall asleep. Even if it helps you fall asleep, the device is keeping you from getting deep sleep. And you want to do everything you can to get deep sleep so that your body can do what it needs to do for recovery, repair, cellular regeneration. A lot of it is its clean out mode. It needs that deep sleep. So we're going to go a little bit into more about decreasing unnatural light, and go ahead, there's a video here for you to listen to.
The next tip is darkness. We are a dark-deprived society, and in fact, we need darkness specifically in the evening to trigger the release of a hormone called melatonin. And melatonin helps regulate the healthy timing of our sleep. In the last hour before bed, try to stay away from all of those computer screens and tablets and phones. Dim down half the lights in your house. You'd actually be quite surprised at how sleepy that can make you feel. If you'd like, you can wear an eye mask, or you can have blackout shades, and that will help best regulate that critical sleep hormone of melatonin.
Okay, I think this is arguably the most undervalued pillar of health, okay? Because in 2018, if you're not prioritizing sleep, you're probably not getting enough. It's just infinite distractions, right? We all know that feeling where we're still sat up late watching more and more content. And again, a lot of great content out there, but it could be having a consequence. So I can tell you that the majority of people who are having sleep problems are doing something in their everyday lifestyle that they do not realize is impacting their ability to sleep at night. Okay? So my top 2 tips there would be a no tech 90, try and have 90 minutes before bed with no tech, right? But the counterintuitive one is get outside in the morning, right? A lot of people don't realize that these daily rhythms are set by light, right? In order to sleep at night, okay, you need a differential between your maximum light exposure and your minimum light exposure. So a dark room, right, has something called 0 lux in it. Lux is a unit of light. If you go outside on a sunny day for about 20 minutes, you get about 30,000 lux. Brilliant, so that's a really big differential. If you go outside on a cloudy day, you're getting about 10,000, 15,000 lux, right? If you go into a brightly lit office, a modern brightly lit office, you're getting about 500, maybe 1,000 lux maximum. Right? So everyone's thinking about what they do before they go to bed in the evening. But a life-changing tip, and this has transformed the lives of so many of my patients, is get outside in the morning for half an hour. Even that will help you sleep in the evening.
Okay, what if I live somewhere super cold and that sounds like pain? Is sitting next to a window gonna work?
No, you've got to get outside. Okay. Okay, and I go through, there's so many ways you can do this. In the UK, in January, it's not that easy to want to go outside. It's dark. Right. It's often dark till 8 a.m. It gets dark again at 3:30 p.m. Okay, I will sometimes put my fleece on, right? And I'll sit outside and have my coffee in the morning outside just so I get that light exposure. Because it's that fundamental to how we are as human beings. We need natural light.
So tip 3 is a really big one, really important. The research shows that if you're on your device before bed, even though you might fall asleep easy, you're not getting into your deep sleep cycles. So that's where tip 1, measuring is really important, because a lot of times I'll go over these tips, especially at the stations during the wellness visits, and the feedback is, oh, I fall asleep fine, you know, it's not an issue, I don't wake up through the night. But still the research shows that if you're on those devices, even though you fall asleep easy, because it maybe helps you turn off your mind or whatever, you're not getting into your deep sleep cycles. And that's really important, is getting into those deep sleep cycles for your health. So tip 3, we went over, you know, your sight, your eyes, and now we're gonna go into thinking of the mouth. So what you want to focus on here, a lot of it is revolving around eating. So the recommendation, especially for those that have insomnia, are to not eat 3 hours before bed, which is a big window there. So if that's too much, I find even me, I would possibly get hungry in the evening, and that would affect me being able to go to sleep. So I'll recommend 2 hours. This next video that goes over this is really well done, and it will explain it well. Basic idea though is that you want to not be in digestive mode of that meal before you go to bed. And this video is also going to go over your heart rate and how important that is to have it on a lower side before you go to bed, so that you can get into your deep sleep. So go ahead, I'll let this video explain it. Listen now.
Don't eat 3 hours before bedtime. That's a big one. Dr. Dale Bredesen, who just did some groundbreaking studies here at UCLA, and which led to the book, The End of Alzheimer's, he is responsible for telling people who have Alzheimer's disease to have 3-hour window between their last meal and when they go to bed. And that helped a lot, resolving brain inflammation. Yeah. Yes.
Do you know the mechanism behind that?
Yeah, autophagy.
Explain for people what autophagy is.
Okay, well, so let me back up. If your body is playing host to digesting food, the factory is open. You're not sleeping well. It's busy, it's doing things, right? If the food is past the initial digestive phases and moving into the small intestine and soon the large intestine, which is what happens within that 3-hour window,
right,
your body is now on coast. It's not working as hard. You could get into deep sleep. In fact, if I have a meal late at night for whatever reason, you know, I'm being sociable, and I go to sleep an hour and a half, I don't get into the deep sleep that I normally do.
And you see that because you're tracking it.
In fact, my heart rate never goes down into the 40s. It stays up high all night long.
That's really interesting.
Well, this leads to heart attacks. You know, older people who are not in good shape, they have big meals, they go to bed, they die in their sleep, because your heart needs that rest at night. It needs to like slow the hell down. And if you have food, the factory is open, the heart is moving stuff around, it can't slow down. So the other thing is that the cellular waste management system is autophagy. And this is when organelles go around the cells and clean up metabolic debris and turn them into things that can be, carried out of the body. Autophagy shuts off when your body's digesting food. Autophagy is ramped up when you're fasting. They did a study that showed that during fasting, the autophagy in the brain starts to clean up the plaque that accumulates in some of these neurological disorders, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
There's hardly a person who doesn't know that eating a lot before going to bed can cause nightmares. But actually, it's not only about the size of the meals, but also the time when you have them. By eating heavy foods for dinner, you encourage your brain to be more active. That's why, at night, it can lead to vivid nightmares. Besides, a hearty dinner disrupts your digestive system, leads to weight gain, and causes problems with your stomach. On the other hand, it's also a bad idea to eat right before going to bed, even if your dinner is light. Your body will still struggle to digest whatever you fed it. Try not to eat anything 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. And if the gnawing feeling of hunger doesn't let you fall asleep, choose to eat fruit.
What I also like with that video, what was explained, what was talked about, was hitting autophagy, which is really important to consider. So when you sleep, you are fasting, and this is even the idea with intermittent fasting or time-restrictive eating, is that you're extending that fasting window of when you're sleeping so that you can hit autophagy, which is your body's optimal clean-out period. It's your body's optimal time to do its natural detoxification process. And if you're not giving your body enough time to do that, or you're not getting into those deep sleep cycles, then your body isn't going to clean out as well as it can. And so you'll get this toxic buildup, which can lead to inflammatory reactions, whether it's swelling, pain, weight gain, headaches, low energy. There's lots of different symptoms of that. And so that's where the deep sleep and getting enough sleep is really important. Another little one I'll add in with the eating is also drinking water or then alcohol and then coffee. So first we'll talk about water.
Number 1, drinking water. But wait, then why do they keep saying drink more water? It'll make you healthy. Well, that's true. Your body needs to stay hydrated during the day, but stop watering it 1 hour before you hit the sack. Otherwise, you'll be bound to make one or even a couple of trips to the bathroom, which will rudely interrupt your sleep. On top of that, most people find it hard to fall back asleep after they get up in the middle of the night.
So I have a hard time with water. I admit this all the time. I'm a big coffee drinker. But what is going to help, especially if you get up throughout the night to go to the bathroom, is to try to drink the majority of your water earlier in the day and taper it off at night. That'll help you from, having to go to the bathroom late at night, especially if you're not getting woken up. The other thing to consider too is a lot of people end up with salt or sugar cravings at night. If you drink more water throughout the day, it can help with that. A lot of times the reason you'll crave sugar or salt is because you're dehydrated. The other reason a lot of times is because you're not getting enough carbs throughout the day. So we don't drink enough water throughout the day, we're really thirsty at night, we drink too much, or we experience carb or salt cravings. Big reason we will crave carbs is our body knows it can get water from Mother Nature carbohydrates like fruits and vegetables, but a lot of times what do we go for? The cookies and chips and things like that, but just drink more water. And another thing that can help is like a Nuun or Emergency added to your water to get some electrolytes. That can also help with the cravings and keep you hydrated throughout the day. Now, coffee is a big one, and this we'll actually dive into in a later tip. It's going to talk about limiting your caffeine intake really from noon or even earlier, because even several hours after that last cup of coffee, even before noon, caffeine's still about 25% within your system. And even though you might think it's not affecting you falling asleep, remember, we're not talking necessarily about falling asleep. It's about your body's ability and your brain's ability to get into those deep sleep cycles. And we want to ensure that that's happening through our habits throughout the day. And then alcohol is another big one, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that for a little future tip because there's some videos we have on that. Tip number 5, breathing's a simple one, and this is just something that you can do to help you attain deep sleep or to fall asleep. Or if you are one of those that normally goes to the device to turn your mind off, do some meditation, listen to a podcast. Sophia has a dynamic sleep practice that you could listen to in order to help you focus on your breathing, to help you fall asleep and then attain deep sleep. The other options are box breathing, which we have a lot of information about that on Target Solutions for you. Or just look up in your podcast different meditation or breathing exercises to listen to, and this will help you calm down, relax, especially if you are getting woken up throughout the night. You could listen to it to help you fall asleep between those calls. And more importantly, even if you are able to fall asleep, to try to get back into those deeper sleep cycles by getting your heart rate to go down and your blood pressure to calm down, things like that.
You talked on your Instagram about you want to live for a really long time or extend your life. I forget exactly how you worded it, which got my attention. And then you said prioritize de-stressing.
Yeah.
Is that tied to sleep? Like what do you mean by that?
Well, stress is an indiscriminate killer. And today, so many of us are losing sleep due to stress. It's one of the reasons why 1 in 6 adults now is on some kind of psychiatric drug.
1 in 6?
Yeah. Is on or has used.
Whoa.
We're definitely self-medicating, and it's not good. I mean, chronic stress is a major problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
So give me some tactics. How does one de-stress?
I think meditation is really important. You know, I'm one of those people that I was trained to meditate. I think this is really important. I think, you know, being taught how to meditate is as important as being taught how to do yoga. You know, we don't come out of the womb knowing how to do a downward dog and to hit, you know, any of the number of yoga poses that we're taught to do with a good yoga teacher.
Another little one I'll tag on with the breathing is, if you're looking for something just a little extra, is to have a scent that you smell when you're going to bed. So whether it's through a diffuser or something like that, like lavender, a lot of what we're trying to do is, again, reset our circadian rhythm. Give us a cue in the morning that it's time to wake up, it's time to warm up. And then at night that it's time to relax, it's time to calm down. And so having a certain scent that you smell, you know, while you're getting ready to go to bed, or, you know, right before, while you're doing your breathing, that you smell to trigger your mind to know it's time to turn off and to relax. So that's another great option. Tip number 6, we're gonna dive into exercise. So a really good tip, and I'm gonna show a video here, is to incorporate exercise in the morning. This has a little bit to do with your temperature, but more to do even with your cortisol levels. So I'm going to play this video versus explaining it too much because it's great information. So let's go ahead and talk about here with exercising for 5 minutes in the morning.
And something really, really fascinating is just simply changing or embracing the time of day that you exercise can improve your sleep quality. And so Appalachian State University did a really cool study, and they wanted to see what time of day, exercising at various times of day, how does it impact your sleep quality? And so they had the study participants to exercise exclusively at 7 a.m., and another phase exclusively at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, another phase exclusively at 7 p.m. in the evening. They compiled all the data, and at the end of the study, they found that morning exercisers spend more time in the deepest, most anabolic stages of sleep, so they're producing more human growth hormone. They have more efficient sleep cycles, what we've been talking about. They also tend to sleep longer, and this is the one that kind of can get glanced past, on average, they had about a 25% greater drop in blood pressure at night. So what's up with that? That's correlated with a deactivation of your sympathetic fight or flight nervous system, right? So you're actually able to shift gears, get to that parasympathetic rest and digest, calming down by getting some exercise in the morning. And so how do we employ this though? That's the question. Because some people it's just like, you know, I can't exercise in the morning. And there's also people who exercise in the morning who might have terrible sleep. And it's because this is not like the magic bullet. This is a thing that's stacking your condition. If you're doing this and then messing up the one I'm gonna talk about next, you're probably not gonna have the best sleep. So here's how to employ this, just 5 minutes. And I tested this. Each morning I do this 5 minutes of exercise. You know, it might be just jumping on a rebounder, you know, a little mini trampoline for 5 minutes, go for a quick power walk, do some Tabata, which is just 4 minutes, and a little mobility work. And
I guess most people don't know what Tabata is.
High intensity interval training, basically. It's 20 seconds of exercise followed by 10 seconds of rest, repeated over and over again for 4 minutes. And in his clinical studies, this was found to outperform, you know, traditional cardio, like the kind of moderate intensity 45 minutes of exercise in 4 minutes.
Wow.
The change in your cardiovascular benefits, body composition, and also changing your mitochondria as well. This is why it works. It does something called a cortisol reset. All right, and we talked about cortisol, but again, it's a good thing if it's in the right time and the right amounts. Clinically, I would call these people tired and wired that would come in looking at the hormone panels, and the cortisol would be really low in the morning and high at night. Thus, they have sleep problems. So you naturally, if your cortisol is on a natural hormone rhythm, it would be elevated at its peak in the morning, right around 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., and then gradually decline as the day goes on.
Does that have to do with what time you wake up?
Sort of. I mean, the cortisol will kind of tend to nudge you out of sleep, but also will tend to notice that as your sleep goes on, it becomes lighter and lighter anyways, right? This is when you tend to remember your dreams, like at the end of the sleep. And so getting this little boost, like helping your body to propel and get your cortisol up via exercise, helps to reset that rhythm and get you back on track. So that's why it works. So that's number one, low-hanging fruit. Just get in 5 minutes of exercise. Start in the morning, no matter what. Just 5 minutes, that's all you need. It's gonna help to create this snowball effect of good things for you. You know, 5 minutes. If this is the time you do go to the gym and do your full workout, so be it, all good. But everybody who's not already doing that, just get that 5 minutes in.
Cortisol sort of gets a bad rap because it's related to stress, but it's actually a really important hormone. It's the body's chief waking hormone. So for about 45 minutes after you wake up, cortisol is the highest that it's really meant to be throughout the day. It's part of the body's natural circadian hormonal ebb and flow. And in that window, for about 45 minutes after you wake up, that's a great fat burning window. You've got that cortisol spike, which is really working to liberate stored fats, stored sugars, for use by your body as fuel. It's meant as a way of, allowing fuels to become accessible so that you can use them and carpe diem, right? Seize the day.
So what I like with tip number 6 and the video just listened to is what you could consider if the weather's, not too cold or rainy, is going outside to get that natural light and do your 5 minutes outside. So then you would get those two at the same time. And you could go a little bit longer if you wanted, but just 5 minutes is kind of the minimal recommendation. And maybe you just go on a walk or something, or you do Tabatas like recommended in the video. Tip 7 is going to continue with what we're talking about with temperature. So another tip or option that you could do is do something to heat yourself up at night, not exercise, but more through taking a warm bath or a warm shower, or even going in the sauna if you're able to do that. The research behind that is that you're warming yourself up, so when you get out, your body will naturally try to cool itself down, so it will help lower your body temperature. And then also just making sure that your room is at a good cool temperature. It kind of depends on the person. Some people need it cooler than others, but that'll really help to get your body to calm down. If we're warm, we're more woken up to get you to calm down and fall asleep. So here's a great video that explains more about that.
The next tip is temperature. Keep it cool. It turns out that your brain and your body need to drop their core temperature by about 1 degree Celsius, or around 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit, in order to initiate sleep and then to stay asleep. And this is the reason that you will always find it easier to fall asleep in a room that's too cold than too hot. So the current recommendation is to aim for a bedroom temperature of around about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, or a little over 18 degrees Celsius. It sounds cold, but cold it must be.
So tip number 8 is going to go into your ears, your senses of what you can hear. So when you're on shift and you're getting calls, those are things you can't control. But when you're off shift, or if you're going to bed, even when you're on shift, really considering maybe listening to something to help you calm down. Obviously, if you get a call and a siren, that's going to wake you up. But then when you go back to bed, between calls, or when you're at home, trying to do something to listen to, whether you're listening to a podcast, remember we're trying to stay off those devices from our site, but you listen to a podcast or listen to some type of meditation. I know personally, I find that earplugs help, and I wouldn't want you to do that if that would cause you to not hear something, call when you're supposed to wake up, but that's something that definitely helps me at home, is put in earplugs so that I can drown out any sound. Or another option for those that like the sound machines, I know I use that for my 2-year-old, works really well. We have just kind of the ocean sounds, and I do find that that also helps drown out any other sound to help me calm down and fall asleep. And also think about those triggers for your mind of, you hear that sound, all right, it's time to calm down and go to sleep. So sound is one that you can focus on too.
To understand how white noise helps you sleep, we need to take a step back and look at how sound and hearing work first. Sound is a wave that moves through the air, vibrating molecules as it goes along. The vibrations hit the eardrums, then pass through the inner ear, where cells called hair cells change the vibrations into electrical signals. These signals go into the brain and tell you what sound you're hearing. The frequency of that wave, technically speaking, how often the particle's vibrations repeat in 1 second, is measured in hertz. Humans can hear sounds from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and the higher the frequency, the higher the note you hear, and also the less easy it is to ignore. And these hearing faculties still work when you're sleeping. Even if you're not awake, your brain can register significant sounds. So when you hear a noise at night and it wakes you up, it's the sudden change in frequency of background noise that disturbs your sleeping brain. So how can you stop those sudden frequency sounds from ripping you out of dreamland? we're back to white noise. White noise, properly speaking, is a constant noise that covers all hearable frequencies at once at a constant power rate per hertz. Its frequency spectrum is completely flat, so no new sound can be heard over it, if it's playing loud enough, of course. White noise essentially masks all other sounds, and that's where it gets its name. White noise is analogous to white light. White light is all wavelengths of light, and white noise is all frequencies of sound. So because it's characterized as constant noise with equal power across all frequencies, that means some sounds that people call white noise aren't. The hum of an airplane engine, for example, or the pitter-patter of rainfall. They're soothing sounds that block out some noise, but they aren't true white noise. But white noise isn't the only color of sound. There are others, and like how colored light is a specific wavelength, colors of noise focus on specific frequencies. And some research suggests that pink noise is actually a better sleep sound than white noise. Like white noise, pink noise contains all frequencies audible to human ears, but the power per hertz decreases as the frequency increases. It's a subtle difference. So here's what white noise sounds like. And here's what pink noise sounds like. And when you play them back to back, you can hear the difference. In a small study of 11 subjects, a team of German researchers played pink noise in synchronicity with sleeping subjects' brain rhythms. When compared to a control that had no sound stimulation, the pink noise seemed to prolong deep sleep and enhance memory retention in the morning.
All right, so the last tips we're going to go into with number 9 is diving more into caffeine and alcohol. So I'm going to play a couple of videos here. One's going to first talk about caffeine and why it's important to limit your caffeine several hours before bed. So go ahead and listen here.
So how does caffeine work and how does it impact our sleep and disrupt our sleep? Well, caffeine is a class of drugs that we call the psychoactive stimulants. And I should note, by the way, it's one of the only stimulants that we readily give to our children without too much concern or thought. But caffeine will impact your sleep in a number of different ways. Firstly, because it's a stimulant, it's more likely that you will have difficulty either falling asleep, or if you fall asleep, you may have difficulty staying asleep, that it will wake you up, and then it's harder to get back to sleep. That's the first problem with caffeine. The second one is something that many people don't understand about caffeine, which is that its duration of action is much longer than you may expect. Caffeine has what we call a half-life of 6 hours, but it has a quarter life of 12 hours. In other words, if you have a cup of coffee at noon, then a quarter of that caffeine is still in your brain at midnight. So a cup of coffee at midday is the equivalent of tucking yourself into bed, and just before you turn the light out, you swig a quarter of a cup of caffeine or a cup of coffee, and you hope for a good night of sleep. And that rarely happens. The third thing about caffeine is that it will actually block your deep sleep. So some people will say to me, I'm one of those who isn't really affected by caffeine. I can have a cup of coffee after dinner and I fall asleep and I stay asleep. So isn't that okay? Well, one standard cup of coffee in the evening, and we've done these sort of studies anywhere between 150 to 200 milligrams of caffeine in the evening, will actually reduce the amount of deep sleep that you get that night by about 20%. Now, to put that in context, I would actually have to age you by about 15 or 20 years to decrease that amount of deep sleep by 20%. Or you can do it every night with a cup of coffee. So caffeine is one of those things that you can restrict. Certainly caffeine in the morning can be used strategically, but try to limit caffeine probably after about 10 o'clock in the morning, or at least try to cut down your caffeine intake 14 hours before bedtime. Decaffeinated coffee, it turns out, doesn't taste so bad.
And now here's the video that explains more about alcohol and why you should limit or really not have any alcohol before bed.
Many of the things that people use to try and help them sleep inadvertently are actually harming and hurting their sleep. Two good examples are probably alcohol and marijuana. Many people will have a little nightcap in the evening and they think that having a drink in the evening helps them fall asleep. It's actually not true. Alcohol is a class of drugs that we call the sedatives, and sedation is not sleep. So what you're doing when you drink in the evening is actually just knocking out your cortex, and you're going into this sedation-like state. You're not going into natural sleep. There are two other problems with alcohol, unfortunately, and I'm so sorry to be giving you this bad news, but Firstly, alcohol will actually litter your sleep with many more awakenings throughout the night. And so you won't feel restored when you wake up the next morning by your sleep. You won't feel refreshed. The problem and the danger is that many people don't remember waking up so much throughout the night when they've been drinking. So they don't realize that it was the alcohol disrupting their sleep. They don't put two and two together. The final thing about alcohol is that it's very good at blocking your REM sleep, or your dream sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And we know that REM sleep is essential for a variety of functions, including emotional and mental health. And so alcohol will actually remove that dream sleep, or it will decrease it significantly, blocking that essential critical sleep. And I should also note, by the way, how essential is that REM sleep? Well, studies done back in the 1980s, some really quite shocking studies, demonstrated that if you deprive rats of rapid eye movement sleep, they will die almost as quickly as they would from total food deprivation. That's how essential that dream sleep is, and it's that dream sleep that you block with alcohol.
Okay, so that's it for your sleep tips. Definitely let me know if you have any questions or concerns with any of the tips, or any feedback or things that you do to help you when you're on or off shift. There'll be more information in the Wellness Today email, so make sure to check that out throughout the month. I'll be putting up a lot of videos and just links to more information. Also post things about different apps that you can try, and just let me know if you need any help.